What if everything around you, your memories, your reality, was just code? It sounds like science fiction, but the idea that we're living in a computer simulation isn't as crazy as it seems. In fact, some of the world's top scientists say it's something we should take seriously. In 2021, a group of researchers from the University of Oxford published a paper arguing that if we want to understand consciousness, we need to consider the possibility that we're all living in a simulation. And they're not the only ones thinking about this. Elon Musk has said it's more likely than not that we're in a simulation, and many others have come to the same conclusion. But what makes them think this is a real possibility? Let's dig into the science and find out. So the first thing to know about simulations is that they're already a big part of our lives. Video games are simulations of reality with their own physics, environments, and characters. But video games are nothing compared to what scientists are talking about when they discuss simulation theory. They're talking about a simulation so realistic that it would be indistinguishable from the real world. And to understand how such a simulation could work, we need to talk about the physics of reality. Our universe is governed by the laws of physics, which we describe with math. These mathematical rules dictate how everything behaves from galaxies to subatomic particles. But here's the thing. We don't actually know where these laws come from. We just observe that they work. So one way to approach this is to ask whether the laws of physics are the fundamental nature of reality, or whether they read just a set of rules in some kind of simulation. Now, you might be thinking, how can we ever know if we're in a simulation? And there are ways. Scientists have developed a few different thought experiments to test for signs that we're reliving in a simulation. One of the most popular ones is the simulation argument put forward by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. His argument is based on the idea that if simulations become realistic enough, it should be possible to tell the difference between a simulated character and a real human being. If we were to run a simulation of a human brain, at some point it would become so complex that it would start to behave in ways that are indistinguishable from a real person. So, the argument goes that if we're able to run a simulation this complex, then we must be the simulation. But the simulation argument isn't the only reason scientists are thinking about this. Another one is the discovery of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics says that reality isn't always as it seems. Things exist in multiple states at once, and the act of observing them seems to influence what they become. It says, though, reality is being written in code, and we're only able to see certain lines of code under certain circumstances. This leads to some weird effects, like the double slit experiment, in which particles seem to act like waves and like particles at the same time, depending on whether we're re-looking at them. Some scientists believe that this could be evidence that we're reliving in a simulation because it suggests that reality is being generated in real time based on our observations. Okay. So we've talked about why scientists think we should consider the possibility that we're reliving in a simulation and the thought experiments they use to test for signs that we are. But what do these scientists actually think we'd be able to observe if we were living in a simulation? For starters, we might notice glitches in our memories. Just like a video game can freeze or glitch, our memories could do the same thing if they were stored and played back digitally. We might also notice that certain physical laws seem to break down in certain situations, like in the double slit experiment. Finally, we might notice that certain numbers keep appearing in nature, like pi or 0.3093. If these numbers are appearing in nature as the result of a simulation, they might appear more frequently than they would if they were truly random. Okay, so how good are we at spotting these signs? Actually, we're pretty good. There are already studies out there that have found evidence of glitches in our memories, and physicists have been able to observe pi appearing in nature more often than expected. However, there's still no evidence that any of these signs are proof that we're reliving in a simulation. After all, just because we observe a glitch in our memories doesn't mean it was caused by a simulation. It could have been caused by something else entirely, like a brain tumor. That being said, the possibility that we're reliving in a simulation is something that scientists are taking more and more seriously. In 2022, an international team of researchers proposed a new thought experiment that could potentially help us spot signs of a simulation. Their experiment is based on the idea that if we're living in a simulation, then there should be limits to how far we can explore space and time. The researchers propose sending a message back in time to see whether we get a response. If we don't get a response, it could be because we're living in a simulation, and the simulation can't run backwards. Of course, this thought experiment won't be possible to run anytime soon. But it's an example of the kinds of things scientists are thinking about as they try to figure out whether we're reliving in a simulation. All things considered, it's probably safe to say that we do and currently have any proof that we're reliving in a simulation. But it's also true that we haven't disproven the idea either. And that's why some of the world's top scientists say that we should take the simulation theory seriously. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll be able to run a simulation of the human brain or send a message back in time and find out the truth about our reality. If you liked learning about this simulation theory, you might like my course on artificial intelligence, which covers topics like machine learning and deep learning.